Okay, I'm getting the thumbs up from back there. So thank you all for being back. Several of you are here for your third session out of 3, so I feel like there should be some gold stars handed out for those of you that are stuck with us. So this is our 4-part series on grassroots community-based fundraising. We had a session on overcoming our fear of fundraising. Then last week we talked about kind of getting your organization ready for fundraising, all the tools and processes and things you need to have in place to support you. So today we're going to dive into sort of the nuts and bolts of putting together a development plan. So this is going to be we're going to touch on just a few things that we touched on in the last few sessions, but if you missed the other ones, I would encourage you to look. They're going to be on demand, available on the library's website if they're not already. Kelly's not in here for me to ask her, but those should be available to you. You can go back and look at them if you didn't get to join us. Hello, Emma. So there's one more session in the series, which is next week, same time on Wednesday, with support system as a fundraiser. So a lot of times fundraising can be a lonely job if you are the person in your organization that's leading it, or if you are a staff person who's the only dedicated fundraising staff. So we're going to talk about how to build your support system, whether you're staff or volunteer, to help you, to support you. I think that's really critical for your growth as a fundraiser. So we learned in our first session together that everyone here is a fundraiser, right? Whether you are staff or volunteer, everybody's a fundraiser. So I'm excited to kind of brainstorm a little bit with you all next week. So you do need to register separately for that session. If you want to join us next week, make sure you've registered separately. Okay, so today we're going to talk about putting together a development plan, which is a comprehensive plan of how you're going to raise resources for your organization. Usually they are annual, so you'll have an annual plan to guide your year in fundraising. Typically, they're annual, and they support your budget, right? Whatever your budget is for your organization for what you want to accomplish. Hello, welcome back. So let's just dive in. So fundraising, and we talked a little bit about this in our first session together. Your fundraising should really fit your organization's mission and your culture. And that's really different for every organization. You know, the basic cycle of fundraising is the same. We identify people who want to be involved. We involve them in our organization. We ask for their support and we thank them. Like, that cycle is the same no matter what. But what that actually looks like is going to be different depending on your organization, your mission, the people involved, the community you serve, the community you're led by, you know, all of that. So what is appropriate fundraising and effective fundraising for Arkansas Immigrant Defense is going to be different than what's appropriate fundraising for the Goshen Pantry, for example. You're different organizations serving different populations. Okay, so these are kind of the three things you need to think about as you're getting ready to put together your plan, is what is going to fit with your organization's mission and culture. And I'll give you some examples of this. My sister is also a fundraiser. She is an event planner. She and I are very different. She loves events. I do not love events. Hello, welcome back. She used to be the fundraiser on staff for Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Ozarks in Springfield. And she did 12 fundraising events a year when she was on staff there. And one of the things that she did when they first hired her as their first dedicated events planner was she talked to the organization and said, look, some of our events are really great for our mission, and some of them are not so great for our mission, right? They had a bowling tournament, which is for families and for mentors and their matches. And, you know, it's an opportunity for their kids that are getting the mentorship and the mentors to come hang out together for free entertainment. Other families can come in and talk to mentors about what it's like to be a mentor. It's a mentor recruitment event too. Like, that's a really great event for them. Fits their mission, fits what they do. They had another event that was Beer Fest, which is where beer vendors would come and you could pay your entry fee, buy your ticket, and you could sample all the different beers. Well, I love beer. I thought it was a fun event, but it's not appropriate for what they do, right? Because a lot of the kids they serve, you know, have instability in their homes because of alcoholism, right? This is not something that really fits with our mission. So that's just an example of thinking about, you know, what is really a fit for you. And this is not just fundraising events, but the way that you do your individual donations, everything needs to be something that fits with your mission and your culture. I know some organizations, for example, who have great success fundraising online, like social media. They have great success with that. That's where their donors are, especially if your donor base skews younger. like social media can be a really powerful tool. I have other organizations that can implement the same thing, and it's crickets, right? It's just not where their donors are. So sometimes this also depends on how do your donors like to give, and where are they? How do you reach them? So that's different for everybody. So you want to find what fits your mission and your culture. You want to select strategies that are efficient. And this is really important if you are a smaller organization, if you're an all-volunteer team that's raising money. Really, really important that the strategies that you choose are efficient, meaning that the amount of time and resources and money that you put into your strategies, you're getting the biggest ROI back. And not all fundraising strategies are created equal, and we're going to talk about that. But think about the most efficient way to fundraise. And then the most effective ways to fundraise. And this just means, have you met your fundraising goals? Did you implement a strategy that is raising the money that you're aiming to raise, or raising the volunteer hours that you're aiming to raise? Okay, so I think these are the three big considerations when you're thinking about what your fundraising is going to look like. Any thoughts or reactions to these three things? Nope, okay. All right, so if you were here for the last couple of sessions, you have heard me harp on this, but some of you weren't, so I'm going to do it again. Your development plan should be focused on individual giving, meaning raising money from individual people writing a check or donating online, because that's where most of the money is. So last year, Americans gave $471 billion to nonprofits. I do not like the word charity. And this is in the US specifically. So you can see this pie chart. The yellow piece, 69% giving by individuals. That's all the money that was given last year in the US. 69% of it came from individual people. Okay? The bequest, the lighter blue piece, the 9%, that's people leaving funds in their wills and estates. So that's individuals too, right? 19% by foundations, the red, and then 4% by corporations. So if you're thinking about, again, I'm going to go back to efficiency and effectiveness. If you're thinking about what strategies are going to be the biggest bang for our investment, right? It's fundraising from individuals, right? So your plan needs to really have a strong focus on individual giving. Now, you may have a fundraising program that you've been operating that's really grant heavy or really corporate heavy, which is fine, but that's your opportunity to shift and really build up your individual donor base. And the other thing that is important about individual donations is that they're a lot more stable than these other sources, right? Foundations change their giving priorities, corporations change their giving priorities, but individuals who are committed to a cause usually don't change what they care about. So this is a lot more stable source of revenue too for you moving forward. Okay, any reactions to this? I know some of you have seen this before, but any reactions? Yes?
Yeah, I'm just curious, so human services is a broad category. Could you maybe elucidate a little bit further onto that? Or like public society benefit, what's the difference?
It's a great question, and I don't exactly know the answer to that. If you go to Giving USA, it's an organization, they have a website, you can get the detailed breakdown of how they define all of those categories. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. Any other thoughts on this? Or does this jive with what you think of? Is this surprising? Is this what we already know? If you've been here before, you already know this, right? We already talked about it. Priorities. Right. Okay. And then this is the fundraising cycle, which again we've covered, but I just want to touch on it again. This is the way all fundraising works. You identify people or organizations or businesses that you have a reason to believe care about what you do, care about your mission. You involve them. Cultivate is a fundraising jargon word, but it just means you get them involved somehow. They come in for a tour, you take them to lunch and talk about the organization, you learn about them, why they care. Build a relationship. This is just relationship building. And then at some point you ask for their support. There's no magic in this. It's just, Leilani, we have, spent time together over the past 3 months. I know that you're really passionate about helping people out of abusive situations at home. We're launching this new program. We're looking for supporters. May I ask for your support in the future for this program? And Leilani can say, sure, let's have a conversation later. And then I'm like, great, I'm going to ask her for something. If she says no, I'm like, cool, and we just move on. It's not magical. Ask for support. And then when Leilani says, yes, here is my $100,000, I say, woohoo, and I just thank her. Keep her involved. Hey, here's how the program's going. Here's what we've done with it. Couldn't do it without you, thank you so much. And that's true if she invests $100,000, it's true if she invests $20, right? Same thing. She's part of the project, I'm gonna keep her involved. And this is how the fundraising cycle works. Then I don't have to identify Leilani again, because she and I are already buddies now. Like, we already have a relationship, she's already connected to the organization. So then it's just a matter of keeping Leilani involved over time. And again, good fundraising is relational, not transactional. I'm not gonna take Leilani's donation and never call her again. Okay, any thoughts on this? Again, we've covered this, but I'm just touching on it. Okay. Okay, so putting together your development plan. Here's what the process looks like. So your organization has goals. I'm not talking about fundraising goals here, I'm talking about like program goals, what you want to achieve for your clients or for the community. So you're gonna at least know in 2022, you should be thinking about this now, what are we wanting to achieve in 2022? If your fiscal year is July through June, then you're thinking about this, in the spring. But you should know what you're gonna accomplish next year, what you wanna do. Then you have a budget that's gonna support that, right? You have your budget for next year that you're putting together. So some organizations, depending on what kind of organization you are, you may have revenue that's earned revenue. So if you're an arts organization or a education organization, healthcare organization, you may have fee for service, right? That may be part of your budget, part of your income. You may also have reimbursement for service. If you do something that the government reimburses for example, Center for Sexual Assault, your nurse exams are reimbursed by the Attorney General. So that may be part of your revenue that you're gonna have in your budget. But then there's part of your budget that you need to raise through fundraising, through philanthropy. So that's what we're gonna talk about today is the budget for philanthropy. Okay, so you know what that number is. We need to raise $70,000 next year, we need to raise $250,000 next year, whatever it is. You know that amount. Then you select your fundraising strategies. So what are we gonna do to raise that amount of money? And we're gonna talk about how to break that down in a minute. So then once you know what strategies you're gonna do fundraising-wise, then it's a question of what do we need to put in place to do that? Do we have the right team? Do we have the right tools? Do we have the right budget? It's gonna cost you some money to do fundraising, so do we have the right budget for the things we need? Then you're gonna create a detailed fundraising plan. So we're gonna talk about that. That's what we're here to talk about today. And then you just implement the plan. And then you start over the next year, right? Those are the steps we're gonna talk about today. Okay, organizational goals. So what do you want to achieve this year? How many of you know what your organization, right now, know what your organization is gonna do in 2022? Some of you, some like yes, maybe it's not quite finalized yet. Now is the time, if your fiscal year is January 1st, now is the time to figure out what exactly you're gonna accomplish next year. And think about a little bit about how you're gonna measure that. So maybe you're gonna launch a new program. Well, how are you gonna know that program is successful? Give a little thought to how are we gonna measure success? Because that's gonna help you fundraise. If you can say this is our goal is to do X, Y, Z. And that should be a conversation of your staff and your board. If you have staff and your board, that should be an organization-wide conversation. Okay, so once you know what you're gonna do, what will it cost? So again, you may have some of these other income areas in your budget, but we're gonna talk about individual donors, foundations, corporations, special events, and volunteers. So those are the things that would traditionally be in your fundraising plan, your development plan. Volunteer hours are not cash money like the rest of it, but that should be in your development plan because that's a resource you need, right? Volunteer hours of some sort. I will also send you the link to this presentation, so you'll have it. Okay. Any questions about any of that? That's just a really quick, here's what you need to do before you start making your plan. Any thoughts about any of those steps? Okay. Okay, so now you need to figure out what kind of fundraising strategies you're gonna put in place to fund what you want to achieve next year. So you're gonna have an overall fundraising target. Again, this should be the same as your budget that you need to cover through philanthropy, right? You're gonna plan to raise the same amount of money that is not covered in your budget by those other sources of revenue, if you have them. Okay, so let's say that, just to have a number to work with, let's say that your fundraising goal is $70,000 next year. Yours may be lower or higher, doesn't matter. Let's say that's the amount of money. So then you start looking at, okay, let's break this down and how can we raise money from different strategies, okay? And these are some of the strategies that you may have. I am not endorsing events. I'm covering it up so I don't have to look at it. But I am going to talk about it because I know a lot of people have events in their fundraising plan, which is fine. But again, we're going to have a heavy focus on individual giving for our fundraising plan, supplemented by foundations, corporations, possibly events as well. But individual giving is not optional. Like that has to be the basis of your plan. Okay. So we talked at length last session about the board giving, which is one of my favorite topics. So how many people have strong giving from your boards that you want to admit to? Strong board giving. Yes. Good. Okay, some. So the rest of you have some work to do. So individual giving always starts with the board. This should be the number one thing in your development plan every year, no matter what organization you are. The board appeal is the first thing. When I worked at the shelter and I was on staff, like January 2nd, the board appeal goes out, right? It's the very first fundraising thing you do every year. And for a couple of reasons, which we touched on last week, but I'll reiterate. Number one, the board sets the tone and sets the leadership for the community. It's much more powerful if you can go to the community and say, all of our board members are invested in what we do and we would like for you to join us. If your board members go to the community and say, I donate to this organization because X, Y, Z, because I know what it's like to be in these shoes, because my mother went through this, because one of my coworkers went through this, it really opened my eyes, so I donate my money and I would love for you to consider doing the same. Like that is a powerful appeal, right? And if the board doesn't give, who is going to, right? If your own board members who know and love your organization, who are the people that know and love your organization don't give, who else is going to, right? Yeah, Joe?
Just a really quick terminological question. When you say structured appeal from the board chair, are you talking about an appeal to the board members asking them to give?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, that's what I mean. So if you are a staff person, you should not solicit the board. They're your bosses. That's awkward, right? The board solicits themselves. So this needs to be your board chair asking the board members to give, or it needs to be some boards do a committee, and the committee is the board giving committee, and they ask. But either way, it needs to come from someone on the board. So that's a structured appeal, meaning that ask is made. Board members, here's the time when we give. We want to achieve 100% board giving, meaning all of the board members make a financial gift. Now, they don't have to actually write the check in January. They can make a pledge, like it's more convenient for me to give in November, but here's what I'm going to give in November. That counts. That's fine. They don't actually write the check in January, but they need to either give or pledge. First thing. First fundraising task every year. Any questions about that? I know this is a hot topic.
How do you keep track of the pledges?
So if you have staff, the executive director will track this. And board giving is usually, I said this last week, is usually confidential amongst board members. Like board members are not going to know what each one gave. But they should track, what percentage of them have given. We're at 75% given. If you haven't made your gift, we need you. The executive director is going to know the size of all the board members' gifts because they're the ones going to process the payments. If you're an all-volunteer organization, probably your treasurer of your board is the one that's going to process. Whoever processes your donations is going to be that person. And it doesn't matter the amount. You're going to have board members that may give $25, and you're going to have board members that may give $5,000. It does not matter the amount. It's just the fact that they are invested in the organization. Right? And you should have a range, actually. Yes?
So say that the board chair asks the committee to give, but you get like 10% of giving to the committee. What do you do then?
I would tell them that you're not going to raise any more until you get 100% board giving. That's what I would do. Because also what happens is, if you're applying for grants, they will often ask you what percentage of your board gives. Right? I had to submit an application this week for an organization who had 85% board giving. And I told them, we'll submit this, but I'm not sure you're going to get it. Because what the funder wants to see is 100% board giving. Like if your board members aren't giving, as a funder, why would I give? Right? So I told them, tell the 2 board members that haven't given that they're holding you back from the $60,000 grant. Because they won't give you $20, right? So I just keep asking. Sometimes, I think there's also an opportunity for board training here. Like, don't just show up to your board member and be like, you have to give. I said so. Bye. Like, explain to them why it matters. Like, this is an organization-wide fundraising program that we are implementing. Board leadership is important. The community is going to look to the board for leadership. It's really important. And I touched last week that making a financial gift every year should be an expectation of board service, and it should be outlined in their board contract. So, like, this should not be the first time that you're bringing this up. Like, that should just be part of your board recruitment strategy. Neil, I'm sorry.
I have shared with the board and the parishioners at our church on a monthly report who donates. And there are board members that donate. Should I stop that practice?
If that's part of what you do, recognizing all your donors, then no, that's fine. Yeah.
So our board has, like client eligible people on the board, so would we expect them to give as well?
There is debate about this, and I touched on this last time. I would say yes. Their gift is also, of course, not going to be on the same level as some others, which is appropriate and fine. There are some people, some nonprofit leaders that are saying that board members who are unable to give at a certain financial level should volunteer more hours, like should make their board gift in volunteer hours beyond what's expected of all board members. I kind of feel like that singles people out in an uncomfortable way, but you could go that route too. That's kind of an organization decision. I have served on boards, and I have managed a lot of boards with people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and I have never had someone say, I just cannot give anything and I don't want to. And I've had board members who've given $5, paid out over the year, right? But I've never had someone, because they want to be involved and they want to make a meaningful contribution just like anyone. And I think if you are recognizing that the level of gift that is sacrificial for people is different for different people, and as long as you honor that and that's the communication that you give people, then I think that's an appropriate appeal. But that's a conversation that you need to have yourself. But again, your funders are going to ask what percentage your board gives, and so you do need to have some sort of expectation for that. Okay, other thoughts on board giving or questions about board giving? Yes.
Sure. I have nothing to do with the library board, but I do help people who are in nonprofits all the time, and they have all these questions. Keeping track of board giving and all that. I'm like, how do you keep track of that? Asking for a friend, literally asking for a friend. I don't do anything with board. When you are appealing to a funder and they're asking, I feel like it's almost like when you are doing your taxes and they're like, do you have any other monies coming in, like tips and antique selling? It's like they want to know, they're going to want to know every other way that you're getting money. So, the board surely already knows that, right?
They should. Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of how you track it, that would just be probably a spreadsheet that your executive director or your board treasurer would maintain. We used to have it when I managed a board or worked with a board. We had a spreadsheet that was like, our board was required to give a financial donation. They're required to attend 75% of our board meetings. Like, there were expectations which were outlined on the front end. They signed a board contract, and we just had a spreadsheet that we reviewed every board meeting. This board member, XXX in these boxes. Who's given, who hasn't. Yeah. So the board sort of monitors themselves in that way. Any other thoughts on that? The other thing that's really important, and I said this last time too, is that I have seen, in my career, that board members take their responsibility as stewards of your money more seriously when it's their money too. And when they are a philanthropist to your organization and they know what it's like not only to be a board member but to be a donor, then they can think much, much better about how the organization treats its donors, which is really important because the board ultimately allocates donor funds. Okay. So board giving, number one in your fundraising program. Okay. I would recommend, if you don't have one, that you have a monthly giving program. This is the other thing that I would recommend. You may have different strategies for your individual giving, which is fine. But monthly programs are really awesome, and I love them so much because these are people that sign up to make an automatic monthly gift to your organization. So there are lots of software databases out there that will automatically process these for you, that will go straight into your bank account, that will put it in your donor database. You just have to set it up. And these can be monthly gifts of any kind, of any amount. So, but it's income that is coming, because you can budget for it. This is coming. It eliminates all of the fundraising cycle except for the thank step. You have to keep your monthly donors involved and keep them thanked. But it eliminates the whole. You don't have to resolicit them. You don't have to do any more than that, other than just keeping them involved, which is great if you're, again, it's efficient. If you don't have a lot of staff or volunteer time. It's sustainable over time, right? As long as you treat your monthly donors well and keep them involved, they're going to keep giving to you. I don't think I have ever in my career had a monthly donor call me and say, I'm going to stop giving to you. Will you please stop my gift? Like, people it just becomes part of their budget. They just don't even notice it's coming off their credit card or coming out of their bank account. It's just, this is the money I send to Root Ed every month, and I don't even think about it anymore. So that's great. And people can give a larger gift to you if they can do it monthly. So I might be able to write a check to Sexual Assault Center for $100 today, but I could give, $50 monthly, and my $100 gift is now $600 over the course of the year. So it takes advantage of that. I mean that in a good way. I mean, it enables people to give a larger gift to you, which is great. And if you can provide any kind of educational or social opportunity for your monthly givers over the course of the year, like if you can get them together via Zoom once a quarter, or if you can make them the first people that you tell big news to, or if you can give them any kind of insight to your organization and kind of treat them as a group, as a club, as people who meet each other, if you can facilitate that in any way, I think it's really powerful. And that can be some really great community building for a monthly program. Yes?
I have a question and a statement.
Sure.
So, question, do you thank them every single month? We just barely sent one of these up. It's like you send a thank you note, a written thank you note the first time. Are you doing something different every month to say thank you, or what are you doing?
You can do whatever you have time to do. I wouldn't say maybe it's necessary every month, maybe once a quarter. Send them something.
Okay, and then my statement is as far as providing special stuff, if you have any merchandise at all that your company gives, give them first shot at it. That seems to be like a real draw.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, and whatever automated system processes those payments will send them a thank you. I mean, you can just do a form. Your gift has been processed. Thank you so much. Right, but in terms of you reaching out personally, then maybe once a quarter.
Just the automated is good most of the time. Okay, thanks.
Yes. I think I sang the praises maybe last week or the week before about Peace at Home, which is a great organization to give to. They treat their donors really well. And I give a monthly gift to Peace at Home, and I got an email from one of their board members yesterday. My gift is not that large. It's not large. But I got an email from their board member that said, hey, we're looking to beef up our monthly giving. We're wanting more people to be involved. Would you care to share, either in print or small video, of like why you support us and why it's important, right? So you can also, if you have those monthly givers, like you can leverage them to help bring in more people. As long as you treat them well and they're happy with what you do, they can kind of become a group that you can turn to help too, which I think is powerful. So if you don't have monthly giving, I would suggest that you consider it. And again, how you interact with that group is going to depend on your organization's mission and culture. But I think it's it's an efficient way to fundraise. It's a way to fundraise that's accessible to people of all income levels, which is one of the reasons I love it. And it's sustainable and predictable, which is always the kind of income we want, right? Any thoughts about that or any other questions about monthly giving? Okay. People also love it when you give it a name, right? AID has the 8 amigos. If you give a monthly gift of any amount, you're an amigo and you're treated, the way that all of the amigos are treated. So that may seem like a simple thing, but providing a name for it helps. Okay, excuse me. So then you should consider volunteer support. Again, this is not cash donation like the others, but of course volunteers can offset your costs. If you have volunteers that do something that you don't have to pay people to do, then that's just as good as donated income, right? To your bottom line. So you should have some sort of goals around, and whatever you do, there's probably some volunteer opportunity that people can plug into. So set a goal for that, a goal for the number of volunteer hours or the number of volunteers or the way that you want volunteers to support your programming, whatever that is. Set some goals. And then this is just volunteer management 101, recruit the right people who care about your mission, just the same way as that fundraising cycle. Identify the people who already care and are already passionate about what you do. Train them well in what you are wanting them to contribute to the organization. And then evaluate your your volunteer program. And that's both in terms of, have you raised the volunteer support you needed? And it's also polling your volunteers about their experience as a volunteer and how you can improve their experience. Both of those should be built into your volunteer program. And you're going to treat your volunteers just the same way as you treat your donors. So somebody that writes you a check for $500 and somebody who donates $500 worth of time are the same donor to you, right? The independent sector assigns a dollar value to an hour of volunteer time, and right now it's $20.27. So that gives you a number to multiply by. If you have somebody that donates 10 hours, it's a $200 value to your organization. I have one more thought about that I was looking for. Now it's out of my head. Those of you, oh yes, Daimara, sorry.
Yes, I have a question. For example, on the board, you're always going to have more active board members than others.
Sure.
And sometimes you're going to have one that is going to volunteer more than the other.
Sure.
Can you apply the same philosophy that the minimum financial pledge this much, but you have been volunteering 4 hours every week at
Sure.
the end of the year, because
Mhm.
you don't want to part of financial pledge?
Yes, you could, if that's your policy.
I mean, we can make a policy, right?
Yeah, sure. Yes, now board members or anyone, any volunteer that donates professional services, those are valued at what the value of those services are. So $20.27, this is just like if I show up and box food for you. But if I donate fundraising consulting services, like the value of that would be what I would normally charge for that. Yeah, so professional volunteers who are doing what they professionally do for you is a little different.
I'm sorry, you might have already said this, and maybe I just missed it. How did you arrive at that $20.27?
The independent sector specifies that every year, so you can Google that. They do they work with I forget which branch of the government it is they work with, but they designate this every year. It's a federal rate, so like for federal grants, that's what they consider to be the value of volunteer time, so it's just a good metric.
You said they're called independent?
Independent sector, you can find out about them online. And you can also assign a different value, so for example, if you have somebody that volunteers as an advocate, like you can also assign a value of what would you pay an advocate for that work, according to your own pay scales for your organization. So you can do it that way too. But this is a number you can use if you don't already have a value that you're putting to that time. So this is not going to go through your financial budget, right? Your accountant is not going to enter this, but it's something that your auditors can put into your finances when they do your audit, and it's just something you should track internally, just because you need volunteer hours, volunteer power to do what you do. Most all nonprofits. Any other thoughts about that? Yes.
So, for example, if you have 10 volunteers, and these 10 volunteers give you 40 hours in a year, you report those internally in your report, 40 hours, 10 volunteers, such and such money? Is that the way of it?
Yeah, so 400 hours would be, right? And so you'd multiply that by $20, or whatever you're using as your rate. Okay. Hello, welcome. Okay, so then major gifts. So probably the question I get asked most is about fundraising is, what is a major gift? How do we track it? How do we treat those donors any differently than the rest? How do we manage a major gifts program? So a major gift is something that you designate. So again, we're counting volunteer hours too, right? So this is people who volunteer at a certain financial equivalent level, or people who write you a check. So it's different for every organization, and kind of the general rule is if you put all of your donors in a list of people that invest the most, on down, the top 10% are going to be your major gifts. So that level, that cutoff is going to be different for every organization. For some organizations, $500 is your major gift. For the University of Arkansas, it may be $100,000 is your major gift. That's going to be different for every organization. But it's the top 10% of the people who invest the most in you annually. And again, that's financial contributions and volunteer time. So it makes sense, again, we're talking about efficient fundraising. It makes sense that you may spend a strategic amount of time with people that are in that 10%. Now, you want every person that gives to you to have a place in your organization, right? We're going to be good stewards of everybody's investment, right? But if I write a check for $10 to an organization and you volunteer 10 hours a week and do a monthly gift, you're more invested than I am, probably, right? Again, everybody on all giving levels have a place at our organization and are important to us. But it does make sense to have a particular strategy for the people that are investing the most. And in my experience in fundraising, it's not the people you would expect necessarily, right? Usually the people that have the biggest passion for what you do, which is why I love it. So we're talking about people who have the interest and the ability, so the interest in what you do, passion for your mission, and the ability to give. Usually you cultivate them a little longer, meaning that the relationship building process just takes a little longer. I can put out an ask on social media. We may just have had like a social media, like you respond and then I respond. That may be the cultivation for like a NWA Gives campaign. But if it's a major gift that we're cultivating, I'm gonna spend more time, getting to know you, making sure that we have a fit for what you're interested in. You're gonna ask for specific support. So if you have built a relationship with this person, again, fundraising is about relationships, not transactional. like then I'm going to know what you care about the most out of what we do. Like what resonates with you the most? What change do you want to make in the community? And make sure that we have a program that fits. We don't design our programs based on donor interests. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if we have program A, B, C, D, and we're raising money for all of them, I'm going to pair you with which one you're most passionate about, right? So we're going to ask for support for a specific program, and then we're going to thank those donors. And you can use your current donors to identify who might be interested in investing, right? So it's a little bit seamless. If you're actually doing fundraising, it's a little bit seamless in terms of your annual gifts that are not major gifts, and your major gifts. I mean, people are going to kind of be bouncing back and forth each year. But you just want to make sure that you have a strategy for spending your time involving the people who are most passionate about what you do. Okay? So you should have some sort of strategy for this, is my point. Yes?
Good question. Is that a quote? Or is that the slogan of a certain, we are the ones we've been waiting for?
A quote.
Okay. So is that a certain, I didn't know if there's a quote or has a certain organization made that their?
No, just a quote.
Okay.
Questions about your major gifts program? And you just decide how much you have time to do. So you may, pursue 10 major gifts a year, if that's what you realistically have time to do. If you have, larger organizations have major gifts officers, it's all they do. So then you would have a much larger portfolio. Again, it's just relationship building, right? Identifying who has invested in you most in the past, who seems most excited about investing in you now. Like just build relationships with those people and ask for their support. If they're already invested in you, or if they are really excited when you talk to them about what you do, they're going to want to be involved. I'm going back to people want to give. Right? So who are the people that are best, closest fit with you and are most passionate about being involved? And again, that's financial supporters and volunteers both. Questions or thoughts about that? I find that organizations fail to raise major gifts just because they don't follow up. Like that's where the ball is dropped usually. Like we meet and I tell you, like, yes, I have loved the Center for Sexual Assault since 2006, since I was a college student. Yes, like what you do is amazing. I would love to be involved. Like my husband and I usually do our giving in November. Could you get back in touch with me in November? And then you don't, right? That's where the ball gets dropped. So this is going back to how it's really important to have a donor database where you can put in like a flag. Hey, get in touch with Melanie in November, right? This is the month that she likes to give. A lot of times it's just following up, just making sure that you're following up with people is, I would say, 80% of raising major gifts. Okay. All right, so this is just my slide of like random tips for individual giving we're talking about. Create strategies for your audience. So I know, there are some communities where philanthropy is much more interpersonal, like I'm just gonna help my neighbor with food this week instead of I'm gonna donate to the food bank, right? So if that's the strategy, like set up a GoFundMe for, you're not gonna identify your client, of course, but like we have a family that could use some food support. Would you donate to this? Like if that's the way that your donors are used to interacting, like meet them where they are. And if your audience is used to donating to like the organization in a very structured campaign, then do that. And you probably have multiple audiences, right? So when I was at the shelter, for example, like we had a lot of interest in supporting us from kind of like age 20 to age 30 professional women. Like they wanted to meet other women that were passionate about what they wanted to do. They wanted to donate to a cause that disproportionately affects women. Like we had a lot of donors in that age group and kind of in that realm. And so what we did is we started a women's giving circle that was kind of targeted toward that, like where we got together we had a luncheon, we had 2 luncheons. We had one luncheon where various staff like kind of pitched their own programs and the group voted on what they wanted to support, their money collectively to support. And then we had a second luncheon in the fall where we just showed up and had some sort of educational program about domestic violence and they just got to know each other. Like that's it. And we created that for that group because we had so many of them and it was clear that they wanted to meet each other. So like that was an audience. We had another fundraising strategy that was really around families, where we talked a lot about our services to families with children. So that was like a different audience, and the strategy was different. So consider like the different audiences that you might reach. If you do something that appeals to people in different ways. So Free Geek, for example, you're going to have people that care about the environment and don't want electronic waste in landfills. Like that's one audience. And then maybe you have people who love technology, and maybe that's a different audience. So if what you do kind of falls into different buckets, think about those different avenues. Think about your different communities. Center for Sexual Assault has programs specific to, our African American population, our Marshallese population. How do you target different communities with fundraising in a way that they're going to want to be involved? Okay, that's something you have to consider. So think about who your audience or audiences are, and do it, in a way that they're going to like. Create a campaign with a dollar goal. If you are just raising your annual budget, like if you just have we have to raise $70,000 in 2022, call it something, right? Just create a campaign, just call it something. And then include your dollar goal, and then include what you're going to do with that money. Like, what are your goals next year? We have a $70,000, Feed Goshen campaign. We're going to feed this many people next year. Just putting it in a campaign and putting it in a one-page marketing piece, will raise you a whole lot more money. People just like being part of a project. They like being part of a group. They like donating to a goal. So that's a much more compelling ask than just, hey, would you make a donation? We're trying to fund our budget this year, right? I mean, you can tell, when I say it, right? The first is going to be more appealing, right? Because I want to be part of Feed Goshen, right? So call it something, create a campaign. That's all you have to do is just call it something, your dollar goal, and then what are you going to do with the money? And then how people can give, right? Which should be easy. Donate online. Here's our mailing address if you want to mail a check, etc. And that's something else. Just make sure that giving is easy. I worked with an organization earlier this year. I don't know if I told this story last week. Earlier this year, I was working with an organization. They're an art gallery. And I wanted to make a donation, right? So I go on their website. There's no donate button. I spend 20 minutes on their website, going through every tab, looking for it. There's no place to donate online. They don't list a mailing address on their website, so I can't send a check. So I called them and I said, in the nicest possible way, I wanted to donate, and there is literally no way for me to donate to you, right? So make sure that it's easy and obvious how you want people to donate. And then you have a case statement. That's just that one pager. If you were here last week, I sent you some samples of those. I'll send out some samples again to those of you who are here this week. It's just a marketing piece, a very simple one page. What is the campaign? What amount of money are we raising? And then what's going to be used for? What's the impact that we're going to have on the community with that money? Very simple, but that's your marketing piece that your board members can take to the community, that you can email to people, that's on your website, you can post to social media. That's just your talking points for the campaign. Okay, consider leveraging Awareness Month. So if you do something and there is an Awareness Month for it, or if there's a time of the year that people are thinking about your mission for some reason, align your fundraising strategies with that month, because people are thinking about you, right? Raise money for the Center for Sexual Assault in April. It's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Maybe Free Geek does a fundraising campaign around Earth Day. If there is something that is going to cause people to think about what you do, piggyback on that and put your fundraising strategies around that. If there's anniversary, if it's your 25th anniversary of your organization or your 5-year anniversary, do a 5-year anniversary campaign, right? If there are holidays, like at the shelter, we always did a appeal around Mother's Day, because we shelter lots of mothers. And we would do, if people donated during the month of, I think mid-April to Mother's Day, they could donate in honor of a mother in their life, and we would send that person a card, a gift has been made in your honor to the Northwest Arkansas Women's Shelter. We wish you a happy Mother's Day. So that gave people an opportunity to invest in us and an opportunity to honor the mother in their life that they love. So if there's something like that makes sense for your population, do that. NWA Gives is a giving day that we do here in Northwest Arkansas. It's in the spring. So be sure that you're doing something for that. That's social media driven, as well as Giving Tuesday, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which is a national social media day of giving. So those are days that people are used to giving. So make sure that you have some sort of request, some sort of campaign, some sort of presence for those days. Aid, last year they started their monthly giving program through Giving Tuesday. We wanted to raise 30 Aid Amigos, 30 monthly givers on Giving Tuesday, which they did, and they raised $15,000 in a day, which was very successful. So just leverage that. It's already out there for you. A lot of times you can integrate your communications plan into your development plan. So if this makes sense for your organization, put in some communications goals. And those communications goals should align with your fundraising goals, right? If you've got a fundraising campaign coming up, make sure that your communication is letting people know. I'm not a communications professional, but a lot of organizations find it really effective to combine those efforts. You should at least have a communications plan specific to your fundraising, even if not all your communications is part of this plan. Like you should at least have, this is how people are going to know about this when we do it. Anytime you can build community among your donors, I love introducing people who are donors to us with their permission. Like, hey, I have this donor and I have this donor, and you all love all the same stuff. Like, I would love to just introduce you. I love doing that. It builds community amongst your donors, will keep them loyal to your organization. It'll give them a better experience as a donor. Everybody loves to meet people that are interested in what they're interested in. So think about ways to do that. Make it easy to spread the word. So do you give your board members talking points, like a card that they can carry in their wallet? Like, here are the things that we're trying to let the community know this month. If you meet someone, in your course of your daily life that you think would care about us, like, here's the things that we want to be talking about in the community. The case statement, that one pager, is an easy way to make it easy for people to spread the word. Give people an email that they can forward, give them the tools. Because if I don't work at the organization, it's awkward for me just to walk up to someone and say, yeah, there's this organization that I like, and I think they're doing some stuff, and it would be cool if I think you can go to the website. That's a really awkward position, right? So just give them their talking points, give them something they can hand out, they can forward, make it really, really easy. I love Why I Give from supporters. So one of the things that we used to do that I've done with several organizations is, like, we pick a month. It could be their awareness month or month that's significant to them in some way. And we ask their supporters to tell us why they give. And then we profile them on social media. Here's a quote from our donor. Every Monday we're going to put a quote from some of our donors about why they give. I love, like, compilation videos that are like, this is why this is important to the community, this is why I care. Like, that's really, really powerful if you can get your donors to share with other people why they give. Now, not all donors want to do that. Some of them want to be anonymous, which is fine. But the ones that are willing, like, that's really, really powerful. Really powerful. And then this is a miss that I see a lot of organizations have. Any time that you give a presentation, or you're talking to a community group, or you're doing an educational session, or you're doing some sort of PR, some sort of interview, anything like that, always mention how people can give, right? You're already there, you already have the audience. Just mention, you can donate on our website or by going to this, or, we're raising funds for this, this is how people can get involved. Like, put that call to action in your communications. You're already doing those communications, so just make sure that people know. If you have a public facility that people are going to be coming and going from, or going to be walking by, you have the pantry, is there a sign like how people can support the pantry? Like, if I don't have food to put in here, but I want to make a donation, where do I go and how do I do it? Like, make it really obvious and really easy for people. Because a lot of times what happens is, like, I am in the moment and I'm really excited about this and, like, oh yeah, I would love to. But then if it's hard, or if I don't know how to give, then I'm going to put my phone down, or I'm going to walk away, and I'm never going to think about it again, right? You have to get people when they're in the moment and they want to give. So be sure that it's out there, how people give, and that you want them to. I volunteered for an organization in college who never asked me to give. I was a volunteer, but they never asked me to give financially, and I could have. I mean, I wouldn't have given a lot. I was a college student, but, like, I would have foregone a meal out and given $15 a month or something, but they never asked me. And so I thought, well, they don't need any money, right? This is before I got into nonprofit work. But, I mean, I was like, well, if they needed it, they'd ask me, right? So they must not need it. So I never gave. And if they had gotten me for a monthly gift, I would have given a gift every month, like, since I was 21, and that would be a large gift by now. So just be sure you're asking, letting people know. I love GoFundMe. How many have ever raised any money through GoFundMe? Anybody? I love GoFundMe. My 6-year-old raised $1,800 last year through GoFundMe for her little free pantry by her daycare. GoFundMe is awesome. It's super easy. It's great for when you have, like, something specific, like if you need a new piece of equipment, or if you have a piece of equipment that's broken and you need to replace it, or if you have a client with a particular need. You're not going to identify your client, but if you can put their situation out there, like, we're wanting to raise money for this situation, anything unusual that comes up, like, GoFundMe is awesome. So consider doing that as part of your fundraising strategy. Like, think of 2 or 3 things throughout the year that you could do a GoFundMe campaign for. GoFundMe is awesome as opposed to donating through your website because people can see the progress in real time. Like if we need to raise $2,000 for this, like people can see how much money you've raised in real time, and people want to help you reach that goal. So I love that as a fundraising strategy. It's a great tool. And then celebrate your progress. Like when you reach 25% of your annual fundraising goal, be sure that everybody on your team knows this and celebrate it, right? Like that's what will keep people, your team, engaged in fundraising, is seeing like your success that you're having. So be sure to celebrate milestones, champion people who are doing the work, your volunteers, your staff members, like give them shout outs, like be sure to celebrate. I think sometimes we get so bogged down in like thinking about the money we don't have that we forget to be grateful and celebratory about the money we do have, right? So be sure to celebrate when you're making milestones and doing things in fundraising. Thoughts about any and all of that? That's just sort of like a lot of things on one slide. Any thoughts? No thoughts? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit, just very briefly, about foundations and corporations. Foundations, so this is grant-making organizations. We're not talking about government grants here. This is private foundations. The Fayetteville Public Library right here has a great Find It, Fund It workshop. Do you want to say the date for that that's coming up?
Yes, I was actually about to say, at the end, give me a second, because I have 2 plugs.
Okay, here's your plug.
Okay, we are having Find It, Fund It in November. And we are also having, I am having a class about filling out forms online. It actually says applying for jobs online, but I'm focusing on filling out forms. We have patrons at least a couple of times a week, and we just kind of have little consultations with them. Some of it is nonprofit things. A lot of people have a hard time filling out forms online, and they don't realize everything that goes into it and all you have to do beforehand.
Myself included.
Yeah.
Myself included.
So I'm having a workshop on that in November, and we're doing a Find It, Fund It.
Awesome. So the library, just one second, Kim, I'm coming to you. So the library has a source database called Foundation Directory Online, and it's a directory database of all of the private foundations in the U.S. And so that's a searchable database. You can search by mission, you can search by location, you can search by grant amount. So that's the place to go to do your funder research, the prospect research, to find out what funders to apply to. And the library, that Find It, Fund It workshop, the library walks you through how to do that. So if you're interested in that, please come back for that in November.
And you can also just call us and say, would somebody show me how to use this? We'll show you individually too.
Okay.
If you can't make it to the class.
Because the librarians are awesome.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Kim was first. Just one moment.
I was just gonna ask the date. What date is that, you know?
The Find It, Fund It.
I'll put it on Find It.
Go look at my calendar.
Okay.
Because there's programs every day.
I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Yes,
I just wanted to mention or ask what is the foundation directory?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still free online for 24 hours through the library?
No, it is not. That was when they had an app. Oh, no. You're talking about the new thing during COVID.
Yes.
They could get it free for 24 hours. As far as I know, they have not pulled that.
You mean you can access it not in the library when you're not here?
Yep, online.
Yeah. They did say they were getting ready to pull some of the things because most people are actually, a lot of people are back at work and back in public buildings and we're open. So they were giving us the warning, this will not last forever. So I think it is, but I can't swear to it because I haven't tested it.
Okay. So any individual person can buy a subscription to FDO just on your own, but it's like $2,000. Yeah. So please come to the library and use their free access, which is great service.
Levels. They have a basic level, and you can just see funders. And we have the professional level that has funders and grants and recipients and 990s.
Yeah. Also, if you are a new fundraiser, as I know some of you are, at an organization that may or may not have kept accurate records in their whole history, you can also just search your own organization to see who has given grants to you in the past. And you can see everyone who's ever made a grant to your organization, which is also helpful if those records are not available internally. Shame on those organizations. Okay. And then you track submit applications. The Grant Professionals Association is a great resource for grants training. So those of you who are members, raise your, woo, woo. Leilani is a board member. Addison is a board member who just stepped out. So if you are really wanting to dive deeply into grants, I would really recommend GPA. We do a lot of different programmings, all of which are available to non-members as well as members. It's great. So that's kind of where I would go for help with grant seeking, which we're not going to get into today. And then you will, when you are awarded, you'll report back to the funder what happened with your grant-funded project. So the role of grants in your development program, grants are helpful for helping you launch a new program, doing something one-time innovative. Grants are usually one time. Now you may get several grants in a year, back-to-back years from a funder, but they usually want you to do something new. Most funders, not all, but most. So that makes grants a little tricky because you may not be ready to do something new every year, right? Like what you do is already, you may be serving more people, you may be launching new programs, or you may just be sustaining your programming, right? And grant makers tend to have a little bit of shiny object syndrome, right? So this is where you do not want to design programs based on what a grant funder wants to fund. That's not appropriate. So grants can be a good sort of shot in the arm for helping you get something off the ground, but they are not sustainable, right? It's not gonna, you can't depend on a grant to pay your executive director's salary for the next 10 years. That's where that individual giving has to come from. Any questions about that? So if you put grants in your development plan, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get it, of course. It's a gamble whether or not you're going to get it, but it's also not sustainable long term. So be strategic about what you think about grants supporting at your organization. Yeah. Did you have your hand up, Art?
On the grant side, when you apply for a grant, aren't you supposed to use that grant only for what you're asked, like
yes, correct,
for the chairs or whatnot?
Correct.
You cannot use it for anything else, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it is restricted for the purpose for which you applied for it. Yeah. Did you have your hand up, Neil? Did you have something to say?
This is all new learning for me because earlier I'm thinking I need another grant from the Methodists. Okay? Already got 25 grand this year. I'm going back at them again.
Good.
But this individual giving, that's hugely eye-opening to me.
Good. I'm glad. It's sustainable.
That's scary. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, yes. Yes, it is. But what I see happen with a lot of organizations who have disproportionate reliance on grants is there comes the year when you don't get it, right? And then you're laying people off, you're cutting your programs, you're eliminating staff. It's very painful. And then by then the community is relying on you for those services, right? They're used to supplementing their grocery with the pantry or accessing services through your organization. And so it's a gamble to rely on grants, and it's not one I would recommend. But if you have grant source, I'm not saying don't apply. I'm just saying you need to also be building up your individual giving so that you can have more sustainable source of revenue. I'm a grants consultant. I do grants all the time, and I like them. But my first thing that I always tell organizations is, what does your individual giving look like? Because that's really what's going to carry you long term. Bless you. Okay. Corporate support, this is 4% of our pie. Remember our pie chart of where money comes from? 4% is corporations.
Foundations,
19. Now, it's a little bit misleading because some corporations have a foundation through which they award, like the Walmart Foundation would be in the foundations, not in the corporate piece of the pie. So there's overlap between those two. But corporate support often tied to event fundraising, and we're going to talk about events here in a minute. It often comes out of their marketing budget, so it's exposure, it's advertising that they're looking for, being affiliated with your organization. You usually have a sponsor package, so like for an investment of $5,000 in our organization, we provide this amount. Your logo goes on our website, we recognize you in our newsletter, whatever. Then for $2,500, this is what we do, and it's a little less exposure. For $1,000, this is what we do, it's a little less exposure. Google sponsor packet samples if you're not familiar with that, and find lots of examples. But you would have a sponsor package, and then just make sure that the corporation aligns with your mission, right? Not all do, right? So I'll just leave it at that. Make sure it's a corporation that does something that that aligns with your mission. Also small, I'm using the word corporations, but this is small businesses too. Businesses, corporations. My husband and I own a violin shop in Rogers. And no surprise, like we sponsor orchestras, right? We sponsor the youth orchestras and SONA and Arkansas Philharmonic because that's where all of our clients are, right? That's the advertising that makes sense for us, and we want a vibrant orchestral community because that's our client base. So think about what businesses would naturally want to support what you do, would naturally want to, access your mailing list, would want to align with you. We had a lot of support when I was at the shelter from organizations whose primary clientele is women, right? Because that's a natural fit. Any questions about that? I'm not spending a huge amount of time because, again, it's a smaller piece of the pie. Okay. Let's take just a 5-minute break and then just a quick one, and then we're going to talk about events. Let's just take about 5.
I will tell you the Find It, Fund It. This is easy to remember because they're like reverse dates. The Find It, Fund It is on the 2nd at 10. And the filling out online forms is on the 10th at 2.
Well, that was very tight.
The 2 at 10 and the 10 at 2.
Okay, awesome. All right, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. me? Yes? All right. So we will finish it out today on, so we've talked about individual giving, we've talked about foundations, corporations. I should have said that usually corporate support is unrestricted. It's usually a sponsorship that they're giving in exchange for advertisement recognition. Usually that's unrestricted. Whereas foundation giving to Arts Point is almost always restricted to whatever program you've applied for. So when you're thinking about what parts of your budget you're going to seek to fund through different means, that's something really important to keep in mind. All right, so we'll end up with events. I get asked a lot to help nonprofits with fundraising events, since I'm a fundraising consultant, and I'm really quick to throw up my hand and say I do not do events of any kind. I'm always a little torn when I do trainings about saying, yes, you should do an event, no, you should not do an event. But what I think that I would suggest is to be really strategic and careful about it. And I just wanted to spend a little time talking about it. So it's really easy, I think, especially for volunteers, to say, let's have an event and we'll do this and this and this. And sometimes what the volunteers are really wanting to do, from a place of perfect well-meaning, is throw a fun party, right? I like parties, I want to throw a fun party. And I see a lot of organizations who do not actually raise a lot of money from their events, right? Am I right? Am I right? Yes, yes, yes. I like a fun party just as well as the next, well, that's actually not true. I don't like parties at all. But I can see how one would enjoy parties, but it's not necessarily worth your nonprofit's resources if it's not doing what you want it to do. So what is the purpose of your special event? This is what I would really challenge you to think about. Is it raising money? And if so, it needs to be something that raises money for you, right? If you put 100 hours into an event and you raise $5,000, it is not a good return on investment, right? Is the purpose to bring people to your location? Sometimes, perhaps you have something that you do that is compelling to see. So maybe you are a farm. Like, you want people to come to the farm. And maybe, like, getting foot traffic to the farm is the purpose of your event, like to help raise awareness, to help identify future donors. If that's the purpose, if it's not raising money, if it's awareness, it needs to be a really easy event to do, right? I think awareness is a little overrated. Like, if it is to raise awareness, okay, what do you want to get out of that awareness? What is the point of that awareness? Is it more clients? Is it more donors? If so, like, is it working for you? Are the people that are coming ending up being your donors, your long-term donors? Are you getting clients that are coming to you because they heard from somebody from this event? Is there a way to find out? I think awareness is sort of a catch-all for we'd like to throw a party, right? So identify the purpose. Now, I'm not saying events don't have a purpose, especially if you have an event that's really well known in the community, that you've done for years, it's the primary way that people engage with you, great. But how can you leverage that event to make sure that you are getting a good ROI from that event? So think really carefully about what the purpose is. So I talked about our Women's Giving Circle when I was at the shelter. So that's 2 events, right? We had 2 luncheons. All that I did was call Bonefish and say, this is how many people are coming. And I had a volunteer team that did all the communications. That's all the investment staff time that we had in that event, right? So that's doable. If I'm throwing a gala of 500 people with, special auction items and I'm feeding people, and like, that's an entire job, someone's entire job to plan that event. May not be worth it. So think really carefully about what is the real purpose. What is the real purpose? Is there a way to achieve that purpose more efficiently through a different strategy? Maybe there's not, which is fine. But think about that, right? If your objective is to raise awareness so that you have increased numbers of clients, like if it's client, is your event something that potential clients are going to come to? Like, is that population going to be at this event? Is there another way that we could network with similar agencies that serve a similar population and get the word out that way? Would that be more effective strategy for this? More efficient, more effective? Think about that. And I'm not suggesting an answer, but I'm suggesting that you think carefully about that. Special events are the most expensive way to raise money. You have to spend more money to raise $1 through a special event than through any other fundraising strategy, right? I find that this question of are participants connecting to your mission? I was at a fundraising event years ago, and it was a golf tournament. I'm not a particular fan of golf. I'm not a particular fan of fundraising events. But I was a particular fan of this organization, and I wanted to go support them. So I'm at this fundraising event, and I was talking to another attendee that was there that I had never met before. And she was like, oh, yes, I love this event. It's so great. I love to come out. She's like, Circle of Life is such a great organization. And I was like, yes. I don't think I said this out loud. I said, yes, Circle of Life is a great organization, but this is not a benefit for them. She didn't even know what organization she was there to support. Okay, awareness fail, right? It happens. I mean, people go because they like a party, because their friend is going, because their office sponsored a table, because somebody else invited them. They may not even have any clue why they're there, right? That's not a good event for you to spend all your time planning, right? That woman is not going to become a donor because she doesn't even know. Maybe Circle of Life got that donor out of that event. That's another reason I don't like it. And if it's an event that is not really tied to your mission and really educational, like in a targeted way, people may not even realize why they're there, right? Or they may get you confused with another organization. So this happens a lot. Like, I think, I'm a community member that has no previous affiliation. I think I'm there to support the children's shelter, but it's the Children's Safety Center, right? People confuse similar organizations all the time. So make sure, if you're doing a fundraising event, that it is really, really branded to you, that there is no possible way that your attendees are not going to know why they're there, right? Special events are subject to unpredictable factors. I mean, nobody's had an event because of COVID, right? Like, COVID has taught us the treachery of basing all your fundraising on events, right? It's also, even outside of the unusual pandemic, subject to the weather, subject to the Razorback football game schedule, subject to the other 562,000 events that Northwest Arkansas has every year. I mean, you're competing with everybody else. And there are a lot of people like me, and we are out there, who would rather donate to you from home in my pajamas while watching Netflix, rather than to have to get dressed up and go to your event, right? So, are you raising, for the staff time that you're investing in your event, if you invested that same amount of staff time with individual giving, would you raise more money? Probably yes. Probably. Now, maybe not the very first year. I mean, it may be a transition, but probably long term, you're going to raise more money that way. Consider staff volunteer burnout. I mean, I know development professionals who change jobs solely because they don't want to plan this gala again. You're losing really good people that are just tired. It's exhausting planning events. And if you plan events, you know this. It's exhausting. And it's work that's maybe not like the reason that you got into the field, right? Like, I can talk to somebody all day long about how much I love this mission, how much I love what we do. Like, we can talk all day about that. But I do not want to be picking out place settings and booking the band. And that's not why I got into nonprofit work. Like, how many people got into nonprofit work because you wanted to design centerpieces? How many? None of us. None of us. Centerpieces for what?
Centerpieces for children. I don't know. Pick XYZ population here. That nonprofit's out there somewhere. And yeah, they're hurt.
Well, my apologies to them. But I'm not sure it's why we're here, right? But staff and volunteer burnout is a real thing that happens when you're really, really events heavy. Are participants connecting to your mission? This is what I talked about. Like, people may not even know. Does it fit with your mission? So this is the example I gave for my sister. Like, is it something that really fits? And this is the real most important one to me. Are you retaining your participants as donors? If you only see these folks at your event and they never give to you another time, is it worth it? I'm just asking this question. Is it worth it when you could spend the same amount of time recruiting and building relationships with donors who would give year after year after year? Because in special events, you have to keep doing the event if you want those people to stay involved, right? You have to do it every year. And that may work great when you have a really engaged volunteer base that can handle this, that can support you, but when those volunteers turn over, maybe there are years that you just don't have that much support, and it's really more challenging. But you lose the support otherwise. Yes?
I think another one that we have to add to events that we don't think about it. We, as a small business owner, we are tired of people asking for donations. You are
Interesting.
small, and they come to your store only to ask to donate to the organization. They don't support you, they never come to you, they only come to ask for a gift.
Interesting. So this is back to transactional fundraising, right? Like that feels icky because that's the only time they ever want to talk to you is when they need money, right? That's bad fundraising, right? Yes.
So, I have some personal experience with special events just crashing and burning, so all the points you're making here are resonating with me. But I'm wondering if you could, either now or later, whenever appropriate, if you could elaborate on how these concerns interact with the need that you've been discussing today and in previous weeks for identifying potential donors and building community among active donors, and like how do you could just elaborate on that,
Sure.
and how to do that without falling into these traps
Yeah.
and becoming overly reliant on special events to accomplish that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I'm not saying don't do events. It would be a very fast presentation if I just said don't do it. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying being strategic. So not all special events are created equal in terms of the amount of time they take. So that's one thing to consider. Like if you can make your event simpler, if you can eliminate, I love events where you don't have to serve a meal to people. That just cuts out a whole bunch of work, right? If you're not feeding people. If you have a silent auction as part of your event, can you cut out the silent auction? Those are such a drain. And to Daimara's point, then you won't have to be soliciting all of the businesses that are tired of hearing it, because they don't have any special connection to what you do. So if there's any way to simplify your event to where it's not so time intensive, do that. Volunteer support is super critical. I mean, the more volunteers you have to help with your event, the less of a drain it is on your staff. Make sure you have enough volunteers that it's not a drain on any one person or any few people. But that's a really good way to do it. And then to Joe's point, I think the most important thing is what happens between the organization and your event attendees after the event. Do you just send them something that says, thank you for coming, and then you don't contact them again and they don't contact you until the next year? Or have you strategically invited people to this event that you think are going to be invested in this long term? And then is the event kind of an introduction to your organization during which you don't make a specific ask? And then do you follow up with those event attendees? I just wanted to follow up with you to see if you would like to become involved in the future and learn more. I would love to grab coffee. Is there a strategic way of making that an identification event? And that might be a good reason to have an event. Have donors self-identify by who wants to come to this event, right? Because they care at some point or they wouldn't be there, probably. Unless it is a super glitzy party that people are not going to know whose event they're at. I would say keep it tied to your mission enough that you really are just going to attract people who care about what you do. And then follow up with them, have a follow-up plan. I love turning event attendees into monthly givers. So everybody that attends the event, hey, call them the week after. Say, hey, we're looking to launch this monthly giving program. If you were moved by what you saw, was wondering if you might want to join us as a monthly giver. Could you consider making a monthly gift? If you can convert your event attendees to monthly givers, then you're golden. Then the event is definitely worth doing, right? But if you have to do this event to get any engagement with these folks, then that is where it becomes a real drain, I think. Events get press. If you have really big news, like the Children's Safety Center just announced their capital campaign, they're building their first building that's their own, that's going to be fabulous off of Don Tyson. They had an event, and the purpose of it was to announce this campaign. That's a good reason to have an event, because they got all the press from it. This is a big announcement. That's worth doing, right? So that might be a reason to do an event. But again, I think you want your event to be tied to the rest of your development plan. So if launching monthly giving is a thing that you are focused on in your development plan, how do you use your event to do that? Get the most bang out of your event that you possibly can and reduce the amount of busy work as much as you possibly can. The Children's Safety Center this year did my very favorite fundraising event that I have ever been invited to, which was so fabulous. They usually have a big luncheon. They call it their Partners for Prevention luncheon. It's a big luncheon event. And they didn't have it this year because of COVID. And they sent me an invitation to the unevent. And it was, because of COVID, we're not having a blah, blah, blah. Please consider making a donation to not attend our event. And it was like there were giving levels. It was like $25 to not have to make small talk with people you don't know. $50 to not have to sneak off back to work. $100 to, not have to eat the rubber chicken at JHQ. And of course I sent the money. I was like, this is the best fundraising event in the world. I would love to know how much they raised from that. But the point being, make it work for you. If you are going to do an event, make it work in the rest of your development plan. And make sure that it's worth it to you. And when you calculate the ROI from your event, like how much our expenses were, how much our income was, how much we made, be sure that you put in the value of staff time. If your staff member spent 80 hours on this shebang, make sure that that $8,000 that you paid that staff member to plan this event is part of your expenses. Because a lot of organizations find that once that's added in, they're actually losing money on their event. So make sure that you really are calculating staff time too. Okay. Oh, that's all I had on events. So questions about that? I think you have to be really careful not to let special events hijack your whole fundraising program, because it can really quickly. It's just good to be strategic about it.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Sure.
Special events are also important, especially depends of the audience you are addressing. Because like in the Hispanic community, we don't have that tradition of giving. So the events are helpful for us to create our awareness, because our community likes fun stuff, and they want to receive something in order to provide something. So I think that it has to be, culturally based as well, in order for us to be able to raise funds from that audience.
That's a great call out, thank you. And that goes back to knowing your audience. But you still want to make sure that you're not losing money, that it's working for you. Right? Or if you do something that is event-based, like, if you run a sports program, right? Like, it makes sense to have an event that's your sports program. I mean, if that's what you do, obviously you're going to be doing it. I'm talking more about events that are sort of, your galas, your golf tournaments, you're not necessarily related to what you're doing.
Oh yeah, tournaments don't make any money.
Right. But it might make sense for you to have some sort of event that brought people together in some sort of sports context, if that's what you're. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about anything? That's what I have. I think that's what I have. Oh, a couple more things. Find out what you need to pursue these strategies. We talked about this last week. So make sure you have the tools. Once you have your plan, make sure you have the tools. You need a donor database. Everybody needs a donor database. You need the staff and volunteers, policies and procedures, training for your volunteers and staff. Again, this is what we talked about last week. But make sure once you have those strategies set that you have built this into your plan. So if you don't have any of this, like job number one in your development plan for next year is to get a donor database, right? Make sure that you build in this capacity stuff into your plan. Anything like that you need. And then finally, you're going to write down the plan. If you joined us last week, I emailed you, or Addison emailed you today, a sample development plan. I will go ahead and resend that to everybody who registered here, so you'll have it. So that's a template you can just use if you want to. That's just my format. It's not, you can change it. It's just a sample. But you need to have dollar goals. So we're going to raise $45,000 from individuals through these strategies. We're going to raise $10,000 through corporations, businesses through these strategies. We're going to raise however much, and it needs to add up to your budget, right? Have volunteer goals, and then this is where a lot of organizations I feel like drop the ball. Put specific tasks in there, put timelines, put who is responsible. The more detailed that you can make it, the more you can measure your progress. Like, are we doing it? Right? If I just say we're going to raise $10,000 from major gifts and there's nothing under there, it's probably not going to happen. We're going to get to the end of the year and be like, oh, well, we didn't do that. But if I say we're going to identify, people for this project by this date, we're going to set, meetings with them by this date, then it's a lot easier to see that we're making the progress we need to make. So be specific. And then, of course, your plan is only as good as you implement it. So be sure that it is workable for you to actually implement this plan. Don't be so ambitious that it's not something you can realistically do. Who is going to drive the bus, meaning who is the owner of this document? And who's going to keep it updated with, have we completed these steps? Usually that's the executive director or the development director if you have staff. If you're an all-volunteer board, it's the chair of your fundraising committee or perhaps your board chair, whoever is the right person, but somebody needs to own that document. And then how often will we measure progress? So whoever your team is, you need to build in some sort of review, like quarterly. We're going to look at, are we making progress? Are we, on target? Or do we need to make changes? And then finally, you can amend the plan, of course, as needed. If you did something that didn't go as planned, which may happen if it's your first year of trying to do this formal fundraising program. That's not unusual. Just change your plan. Or the community changes, right? Everybody's development plans are blown out of the water because of COVID, right? Whatever anybody planned to do last year is gone, or was gone. So sometimes changes in the community. So you can always amend the plan, but your plan should require 100% of your staff and volunteer time available for fundraising. The plan should include everything you're going to do. And if you're going to change it, if you're going to add anything to it, you need to take out something else. This is also where your development plan becomes the safeguard for you as a staff member, if you're a staff member, or if you're a volunteer that only has so much time. Like it's really common for people to say, oh, we should do this, well, we should do this, well, let's add this. And my response to all that was always, okay, what are we going to take out? Because this is my full-time job. Like I work 40 hours a week. This is as much as I can do. It safeguards your time if you already have this plan in place and everybody already understands this is what we're focusing on. You can always say that's a great strategy and we'll consider it for next year. Or if it's something that really is a great opportunity, then okay, but we need to take out something else. And if you're all volunteer, it's the same thing. Like this is the amount of volunteer time we have. So if we need to do something new, then we need to take out something else. So don't add strategies without subtracting strategies, and don't let people just pile stuff on. Having a good development plan is a good buffer against people just willy-nilly doing stuff that stresses you out, right? And gets everybody's commitment in the front end. Okay, I think that truly is all I have. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, thank you all for coming. I hope you can join us next week. It's going to be partly talking about building your support system and partly a little bit of brainstorming if this group wants to stay connected beyond this series. So I thank you for your time, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I will send out the development plan template for those of you who didn't have it, and I'll also send out the board one-pager too for those of you that don't have it already. Okay, again, thank you to the library so much for hosting.